Welcome to WagerTalk TV and week 19 of the CFL Two and Out show. We are nearing the end of the CFL season, a couple of weeks after this one. Still a little bit of playoff positioning to discuss on the show. And with us, our insider, Rob Braley, for our insider segment, of course, but Andrew McInnis, WagerTalk's number one CFL capper. Andrew, welcome to the show. And we saw some pretty good games last weekend in the CFL, including the battle in the West. We saw the Argos celebrating their, I believe it was their 150th year in the league, and some faces there. Andrew, I think he played before you were even born. Rob could probably confirm this, but watching on the sidelines, Rocket Ishmael, formerly of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I saw him and he had like the gray goatee, and I suddenly felt about 20 years older than I already feel right now. Were you able to catch any of that Argos game?
Yeah, of course. And you know what, Carm? I really like seeing a lot of players be honored across the league. I for all kinds of different teams as well. It helps grow the league, I think. And I think when those guys get honored, it really helps grow the game and show the fans these guys what they were able to do when they were in the CFL, when they were playing. Hopefully some of the guys currently playing right now can put up numbers like they put up and have success. You're seeing guys get honored in BC. You're seeing guys get honored in Toronto, guys get honored in Ottawa. So it's really good to see. And Carm, I'm off a really good weekend, man. The 5% winner again. So 9-2 run with the 5% plays. And overall, 68% with my CFL action for every play since the early August. So I was able to cash in on a first half ticket with the Alouettes on Monday. So it's always nice to be having some turkey and on the Canadian Thanksgiving and watching a game and cashing a CFL ticket in the afternoon. So that was always nice.
It definitely was. Rob, I got to bring you in because you remember all of these guys, of course, especially with your involvement in the CFL. But seeing some of these guys and even the announcers during the game were getting confused just because some of the crossover of names. I think it was like the first or second play of the game. Chad Kelly goes back. I think it was an incomplete pass or a sack or something, but they called him Chad Owens because Chad Owens was obviously there being honored as well. But we saw some of the great Argo kickers, Noel Prefontaine. There's I think there's three of their kickers there. It was a pretty good show. Had I known all those guys were going to be there, I would have made my way down to BMO Field to watch something other than Toronto FC losing another game and watching the Argos win one. But any takeaways from that?
No, I think Toronto did a fantastic job of getting some of their alumni back into Toronto. The CFL, I don't think they do a great job of that anymore. They used to keep, like Hamilton would always keep their alumni guys around, and a couple other teams did, but that seemed to have disappeared over the last 10 years or so. But it's great to see that the Rocket came back, even though the Rocket signed a multi-million-dollar contract with Bruce McNall. That's when our family owned the Ticats at the same time. And I don't think he ever got paid. So good for him for showing up. Because I think they still owe him a couple $1 million from 1991. If you put the interest on that, that's a little bit of money there. But anyway, it was great to see the Fluties and the Rockets and the Owens and, like you said, the kickers. And I think Toronto did a fantastic job on the weekend of celebrating the 150th birthday. That was great.
I think I still have somewhere in this house. I still have a box of Flutie Flakes. If you remember those. Andrew, you don't know what Flutie Flakes are, but they were like corn flakes with Doug Flutie on them, and they were called Flutie Flakes. So this is how it is. If you can get your picture on a cereal box, you've made it. So
yes.
We're gonna get you like on a Count Chocula box or something. McInnis's Count Chocula or whatever. But with that said, Rob, I want to get right into the insiders segment of this show. And Andrew, I want you to jump in where you feel necessary. But Rob, we're looking at teams that are already eliminated from the playoff contention. I want to know specifically how do you approach betting on these teams? Any strategies, or is it just a game by game decision?
Well, I'll tell you what I do, and I don't look at the entire body of work for the season, but I do like to go back 4 or 5 games and see who's consistent, who's not, who's performing now, and not who's performing in week 3. And you take a look at the 3 teams that are still, not fighting for playoffs, but are still fighting for home field and stuff. You got Saskatchewan, you got Calgary, you got Hamilton and Montreal. Hamilton, believe it or not, is probably the most consistent of the group. I mean, Saskatchewan's lost 6 of 7. Calgary's lost, 3 of 4. Montreal wins 2, loses 2. But it's tough. It's tough to put money on it early. But I think you got to wait, and you got to read what the coaches are saying. You got to read, what players are in and what players are out. It's long into the season now, so everybody's suffering injuries. And I think you got to be very careful betting these teams that, that they're in, but what are they fighting for? It really doesn't matter. The only 2 teams that are completely out of it now are Ottawa at 4-12 and Edmonton at 4-12. So I generally stay away from those teams, especially if they're on the road. Like if they're going into Toronto, Toronto still wants to win football games. Winnipeg still wants to win football games. BC still wants to win football games. So you got to be careful with these teams, but there's still some opportunities there, I believe, to make some money. And if like Calgary right now hosting Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan's lost 5 in a row. How is Calgary a 3-point favorite over anybody? That number kind of surprised me, but now I understand. Like you look at the last 4 or 5 games, and Calgary may have the edge, believe it or not, with Jake Mayer. I mean, things are just falling apart in Saskatchewan, and the same thing happened to them last year. I think they lost their last 6 games in a row to finish the season. So there's a pattern there that I don't want any part of. So maybe I lean Calgary this week over Saskatchewan. So we'll see
Yeah,
what
and we're going to
happens.
get to that game in a second, and I'm sure Andrew might want to chime in on that one as well too. But we talk about this stretch run, 3 weeks left in the season. Is this one of those ones where, as you mentioned, with a couple teams eliminated, and obviously Calgary could be eliminated this weekend if they lose to Saskatchewan? Um, are you looking to bet on favorites? Are you looking to bet on dogs, or again, is it one of those ones where you need to sort of listen to wait mm, a day before game time, wait for the coaches to announce or at least talk about or mention whether they're going to sit players, whether it's the full roster playing. Um, dogs, favorites, where are we going, Rob? Lead us.
I'm not sure you look at it that way. I don't look at teams so much. I look at the numbers. If the numbers make sense, there's not much you can do about it. But if there's something you see that's off, and then you jump on it, right? Like right now, I cannot bet money on Saskatchewan. I can still put some money on Montreal. They're going into Edmonton. I mean, that's a tough game, and Montreal seems to find a way to lose close games. But and Hamilton's hosting BC. I think that line is BC plus 3.5 coming into Hamilton. Hamilton might be a lean there. I don't know if they're going to win the game outright, but it's going to be closer than people think. I think Hamilton's been pretty decent in the last 3 or 4 games, and BC coming off that loss. They just probably gave up their chance of winning the West, but they still have a home playoff game guaranteed in the West. So I say advantage Hamilton with motivation there.
I have to think so too. I think the only line that isn't currently up that is once again is the Toronto Argonauts line against the Ottawa Red Blacks, and that has a lot to do, obviously, with the quarterbacking situation in Toronto and whether Chad Kelly plays or not. Andrew, thoughts on Dogs' favorites in this final 3-week run out?
Oh, look, of course, I agree with what Rob said. It's circumstantial, but when I was looking at this topic overall with favorites versus dogs, I think it's one of those things where at which point in the season are some of these teams that aren't performing at a high level, are they just kind of done and checked out and ready for, vacation with their family and ready to check out for the season? And when I look at a team like the Edmonton Elks, when I looked at a team even like the Ottawa Red Blacks last week and different teams like that, you kind of get that feeling that everything you saw, all the bright spots you've seen from them, the times they've covered point spreads, the times that they've put together good drives and, played well and looked like a promising team during their rebuild, you kind of feel like those might be over those times. Like sometimes in certain situational spots, you want to bet on the team that's getting so many points and maybe fade the team that's already locked into the playoffs. And I understand that, but at a certain point, you want to just bet on the better team. And the reason why these teams are better is because they don't just have a better first string, they have a better second string guys too. And I think that sometimes in a game like the one we have this week with the Alouettes versus the Elks, I look at that interesting spot with the Edmonton being at home. I understand, but I still would not put my money on the Elks right now. I just think Montreal is far too locked in as they head towards the playoffs. So there's certain situations to look at here as we approach it. I think Hamilton's really turned it on, though. Their offense has really stepped it up. But again, BC is off a tough one last week, and they're going to want to bounce back. I just think down the stretch here, I'm actually more interested in looking at some of these favorites than I am the underdogs. And in the CFL, I love being an underdog better. But at this point, I think my money is more so on favorites than it is on dogs.
Andrew McInnis, WagerTalk.com. You can find him on Twitter as well, too, or the X, whatever you want to call it, at McInnis Picks. And, of course, Rob Braley, at Rob_Braley. And, of course, myself at Carmine Bianco WT. Rob, we talked about it from week one of this CFL season. We saw a lot of games, week 1, 2, and 3, where we were on the right side of the CLV, the closing line value, and we did not get the results on those games. You look at this game, and this is another thing I talk about on other shows, is a must-win doesn't mean that you're going to win. It shouldn't be part of your handicapping. And lo and behold, as you mentioned, the Calgary Stampeders are a 3-point favorite right now. And this is a Calgary Stampeders team that has, where are we here? 4 wins and 11 losses on the season. Talk to me about this Saskatchewan Calgary game, because Saskatchewan's lost 5 in a row. The pressure has to be mounting on this team as well.
Yeah, Saskatchewan, I don't know what's going on there. Like I said, the last 5 games, they lost to Hamilton 38-13. BC beat them 33-26. Ottawa beat them. Edmonton beat them. Winnipeg crushed them 51-6. So they're following the wrong direction. They're on their way down. They're not on their way up. Now Calgary's got a second life. And Calgary, if they win tomorrow, they still have 2 games left, and I think Saskatchewan only has 1 game after that. And Calgary, if they win on the weekend, they will have the tiebreaker. The series has gone 2-1 in Calgary's favor. I mean, both these games were decided by less than 3 points that they've played so far. So I'm expecting a close game, but I think Calgary somehow is going to pull this out. And then, the Dickinson brothers will have to wait till the last week of the season to see who's going to the playoffs and who's not. The one thing I want to talk about this time of year as well, Carm, is the weather. The weather can be a factor from here on in. BC is coming to Hamilton. It's supposed to be a high of about 10 degrees Celsius, winds up to 35 kilometers. It's supposed to rain during the game time. So that's another factor, is just keep an eye on the weather, especially in these open CFL stadiums. It does become a factor, and especially in Hamilton, as Andrew understands. If the wind's coming in the wrong direction, you can only score at one end of the field, and that eliminates a lot of points. So the BC at Hamilton total, I believe, is 48.5. Saskatchewan, Calgary is 48.5, and Montreal at Edmonton, I think, is 47.5. So keep an eye on the weather. The weather becomes a factor with the totals. I don't know if it affects the game score so much, but if it's a big windy day in Hamilton, I think Hamilton's running game kind of gives them an advantage, because Butler went off for about 150 yards last time they saw each other in BC. So I think Calgary has a chance to get back into this hunt, believe it or not. And just be careful with BC at Hamilton on Friday night because of the weather factor.
Yeah, and Andrew, you look at it, we're talking about this Saskatchewan, obviously games. It's the biggest one of the weekend, and you look at this, the schedules, the runouts. If Calgary is able to win, they still have a game to make up. Saskatchewan has one game left after this weekend. They host the Toronto Argonauts, who've already clinched and likely will be resting players in that game, which won't be doing Calgary any favors. But Calgary themselves finish out after this weekend against the Lions and Blue Bombers, top two teams in the West. Not ideal for them either, unless, of course, by that point, the Blue Bombers have locked in first in the West. Any thoughts on the run out of these schedules and the game itself?
Carm, like I said, I think that I'm still looking to bet on the better teams, even if they're resting players and things like that. I've fallen victim too many times. At certain points, kind of like with Toronto and Winnipeg a few weeks ago, we saw there was a good opportunity to take a Toronto team, although they had players resting. But I think overall, down the stretch, in certain situations like the one you just spoke about, I'm going to be looking to bet the favorites still, because I just think that they're in the position they're in because of the talent and what they have to offer. If they sit one or two key guys, it's going to be baked into the number. And I feel like, as Rob said, we're betting numbers, not teams and not games. And I think that people always forget that these situations, like in the NFL, whenever a quarterback is injured, people are like, okay, I have to bet against this team. Sometimes I want my money on that team because the point spread changes and it's baked into that number. So I'll probably be looking to bet, against some of these dogs going down the stretch. But I wanted to chime in about the totals. Rob mentioned the weather. Of course, that's certainly a factor here, and everyone has to make sure you're checking in on that. But just want to be very clear, the overs have not slowed down whatsoever. Like, it's been about 4 or 5 weeks now of overs hitting at a very, very solid clip. And with some of these teams at this point, whether it's been big games or a meaningful game, playoff game, divisional game, whatever it might be, these games have not slowed down whatsoever. Of course, the BC Winnipeg game is a pretty good example of that one, but there's a lot of games right now that even if they start slow, they're continuing to score. And I feel like that's something that we all have to be aware of going into next CFL season. I always knew that the season started with unders, but the way it's ending has really caught my eye more than it started. With it's almost like it took these teams like 14 weeks to get their offenses going here, guys, and then all of a sudden, every week since then's been all overs.
Carm, there's one thing I want to add as well.
Sure. Go ahead.
Let me add, and I notice, Andrew, I'm picking up a pattern of like, say, Toronto's hosting Ottawa. First halves can be very, very successful as well. Like Toronto's going to come out, they're going to play the first half, and they're going to play lights out, and they might cruise the second half. But the favorites of 7 or 8, you're getting maybe 4 or 5 in the first half. Look for those opportunities as well, because the first halves are very, very important to the teams that are going to the playoffs, and they want to keep the starting rotation in there, the starting line, the starting running back, the starting quarterback, and then they'll cruise on the second half if they're up a couple touchdowns. So the first halves can be very important as well.
Great point.
Very good point. Guys, if you're watching this video and you haven't already done so, please remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the Wager Talk shows that are either taped or live and posted. A lot of actionable info. And of course, drop a comment in this video and let us know what you like about the show, what you might not like about the show, who you like this weekend, who your best bet is. We love to hear from you guys. So please drop a comment and hit that like button. Andrew, only 3 lines currently up. Of course, the Red Blacks and Argos are not up yet. We'll have a look at the numbers now, but anything that stuck out to you, and give us an extra point winner.
Yeah, going over things. Of course, we've got just to kind of review things here. BC -4 on the road and against Hamilton. Like Rob stated, total at 49 in that one. Saskatchewan Stampeders, you got Calgary -3 favorites, total 47.5 in that one. Montreal Edmonton, as we talked about, Montreal -2 favorites on the road, total at 48. Guys, I'm going back to a strategy that's cashed me many, many tickets for my my best bet here, my show play. We're going to go over 47.5 in the game of the week with Saskatchewan and Calgary. Looking at some of the games they've played, we've seen them get into the 60s, the late 50s. We've seen score lines of both teams putting up 30 plus points, and I don't think that anything's going to change. Saskatchewan used to be a dominant defensive team, and that's gone. And Calgary, their offense has been a bit shaky. A lot of it's due to turnovers by Jake Mayer. But if there's a team in the league right now that I actually trust Calgary to do some damage against, it actually is the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So when these two teams get together, the two brothers are the coaches of these teams here. I expect points. Don't look for many defensive stops in this game. I'll take over 47.5 for my best bet here.
There you have it, over 47. Let's see if we can get a run out of 3 straight winners, Andrew, to end the season, and then we gear up for the playoffs. That's it for the today's CFL 2 and Out show. Appreciate Rob Braley always coming on to give us his info and insight in the CFL. Who he's been involved, the family's been involved as well too. For so many years with ownership of teams. And of course, Andrew McInnis, our CFL expert over at WagerTalk. For myself, Rob, and Andrew, this is 2 and Out. We'll see you next week for week 20. Good luck with your wagers.